Hey, wake up. It's Means Morning News. Just after 11 a.m. on the East Coast, I'm Sam Sachs. It's the Friday show. It's also World Potato Day. You can choose which one you want to celebrate. As for me, I'm going with the spud. And we begin, as we often do, in Gaza, where the U.S. and Israel are pressuring Hamas into accepting a ceasefire agreement that won't actually end the genocide against Palestinians. A new framework drafted by Trump's top foreign policy dealmaker, Steve Witkoff, would establish a 60-day ceasefire and prisoner exchange while allowing some aid to flow into Gaza. Israel has reportedly signed off on the agreement. Representatives of Hamas are currently reviewing it, but have indicated that it's not favorable and doesn't meet any of their core demands. According to DropSite News, the Trump administration has reneged on promises it made to Hamas negotiators regarding a permanent ceasefire after the release of American hostage Edon Alexander earlier this month, and that the new proposal is substantially different than the one Hamas accepted earlier this week that was then rejected by Israel. Here's what one source close to negotiations told DropSite, quote, "There are a lot of reservations on this paper as a framework. There are a lot of loopholes. There are a lot of ambiguities. Israel will never agree to end the war under this framework. The number of aid trucks are not mentioned. There are no specifics about where the Israeli forces will withdraw to. All of these are problems which will probably impede this." Witkoff tried to accommodate Israel much more than what was in the earlier paper, and it's going to take some time before a deal gets approved by the movement. Concerns that this is all just a means to relieve pressure on Israel for a few weeks before the genocide is resumed were confirmed in Israeli media, where government officials claim the new ceasefire agreement will allow the Netanyahu government to keep prosecuting the war on Gaza. Again, this is from DropSite. Quote, "Soon after the Witkoff draft was circulated, Israeli officials told several Hebrew language news outlets that the vague language in the draft would allow Netanyahu to resume the war after 60 days. A senior Israeli official, according to Haaretz, suggested that U.S. officials deliberately crafted ambiguous language around the issue of ending the war to make the deal acceptable to both sides, pointing out that the proposal does not include a demand for Israel to end the war or withdraw from Gaza." Shortly after accepting the framework, Israel launched more attacks on Gaza, killing at least 18 people. Also, the Israeli military issued evacuation orders for areas of northern Gaza, forcing more Palestinians to flee from their homes. These are the largest evacuation orders since March, when Israel violated the last ceasefire deal. And there are also reports of more Palestinians being attacked by the Israeli military as they seek out food assistance from a site run by the U.S.-backed sham Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Okay, turning to Capitol Hill now. A Republican congressman is threatening the nation's capital with legislation that would suspend federal funding for the metro system until the city agrees to name its trains after President Trump. Rep. Greg Steube from Florida introduced the Make Auto Rail Great Again Act. It targets the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority, known as WMATA, which comprises all the metro trains and buses in D.C. Steube's bill would suspend federal funding for the system until it's renamed the Washington Metropolitan Authority for Greater Access, or WMAGA. I'm serious. Not only that, the bill would require the Metro Rail to be renamed the Trump Train. Strange demand given that Trump has probably never stepped foot on a piece of public transportation in his entire dang life. Stubbe said of his bill, quote, "In the spirit of Doge, this bill demands accountability by conditioning federal funding on reforms that signal a cultural shift away from bureaucratic stagnation toward public-facing excellence and patriotism." Yeah, sure. Whatever you say, dude. Just admit you're part of a cult of personality that demands you constantly debase yourself in Congress. As The Hill reported, Stubbe is one of many Republicans in Congress who want to honor the dear leader by naming crap after him. Rep. Addison McDowell from North Carolina introduced a bill to rename Washington Dulles International Airport after Trump. Notably, the other airport in Washington is already named after Reagan, so Republicans have a habit of doing stuff like this. And Rep. Joe Wilson from South Carolina introduced legislation to print $250 bills featuring Trump's face. Then there's the Congresswoman from Florida, Anna Paulina Luna, who is sponsoring a bill to put Trump on Mount Rushmore. Well, I hope he sees all this stuff, guys. Meanwhile, can the rest of us get some damn health care, please? And finally, staying on Capitol Hill, the Congresswoman who occasionally says slurs during committee hearings has reportedly created an online sock puppet army to boost her brand. Wired has the story on the attention-obsessed Congresswoman Nancy Mace, who's distinguished herself recently on Capitol Hill as the loudest and most annoying anti-trans bigot. This is from the outlet. Quote, "Mace, according to former staffers, was setting up burner accounts on a variety of social media platforms to monitor what people were saying about her and bolster her image. They also claim she requested that staffers make their own burner accounts to defend her online." One staffer told Wired, quote, "We had to make multiple accounts, burner accounts, and go and reply to comments saying things that weren't true, even Reddit forums. We were congressional staff, and there were actual things we could be doing to help the constituents." Mace previously styled herself as a moderate, pro-LGBTQ anti-Trump Republican, and then something happened and she rebranded herself as a freaking lunatic, pursuing all sorts of attention-seeking stunts. She wanted to get punched in the face during the January 6th riots, just so she could boost her profile. She recently showed a nude photo of herself during a committee hearing as part of a nasty feud she's having with an ex-boyfriend. And she frequently posts pictures outside various all-gender bathrooms, deputizing herself as the authority on where transgender people can pee. Must be strange to live in South Carolina's 1st congressional district and have no representation because your congresswoman is constantly crashing out. The World Meteorological Organization released some grim projections for the remainder of the decade. Over the next 5 years, there's a 70% chance the global temperature average will be 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. That would put the world firmly on track to blowing through the warming thresholds established by the Paris Climate Agreement, which the US pulled out of under Trump earlier this year. Last year was the first year in which an increase of 1.5 degrees Celsius was recorded, partially fueled by natural El Niño conditions. But the WMO said there's an 86% chance that at least one more year over the next 5 will also breach the threshold. World Meteorological Organization Deputy Secretary General Co Barrett said in a statement, quote, "We have just experienced the 10 warmest years on record," Unfortunately, this WMO report provides no sign of respite over the coming years, and this means that there will be a growing negative impact on our economies, our daily lives, our ecosystems, and our planet. Most shockingly, the climate body estimated there's an actual chance that 1 year over the next 5 could see temperatures increase by 2 degrees Celsius over pre-industrial times. The WMO put the chances of that at just 1%, which is small, but it will increase alongside the warming of the planet. And based on the actions of the Trump administration over the last 4 months, you'd think the president has a bet on the over. This week, news broke that the EPA was considering repealing all greenhouse gas regulations on power plants. The industry is the second largest driver of climate change pollution in the U.S. Now to a brazen attack on the union rights of public workers. It's going down at the Department of Education, which is attempting to change contract language to make it easier to discriminate against pregnant and LGBTQ workers. Bloomberg first reported on an email the department sent earlier this month to the union representing its workforce, a chapter of the AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. Here are the details, according to the outlet. Quote, it proposed that the word pregnancy be removed from several clauses, including one specifying types of discrimination that are prohibited in granting promotions. It said rules prohibiting discrimination when disciplining employees or choosing participants for career development programs should be amended to remove mention of sexual orientation, and said sexual orientation and gender identity should be struck from a list of characteristics that could not be used to exclude workers from the department's student loan repayment program. The department claimed that these changes are necessary to comply with President Trump's executive order that defends women from so-called gender ideology extremism. The union rejected the changes and said the department does not have the authority to modify the labor contract and threatened to sue if it tries to do so unilaterally. Local AFGE president Sharia Smith told Bloomberg, quote, the executive order does not trump our contract, and they know that. All right, gang, one more thing to take care of before we can finally throw that spud party. It's time for this week's Rich Dicks. Let's check out those nominations over on Blue Sky. Here's one for the old president, Donnie Trump. Hard to argue against that, but might be a tad too obvious. Next up, we've got one for Trump's spokesperson, Nazi Barbie Caroline Leavitt. It's another good nomination. She lies on behalf of the rich every single day. And then there's a nod for the son of New England Patriots owner Robert Kraft. It's Josh Kraft, who is now jumping into politics with a mayoral run in Boston, a city he doesn't even live in. The Super PAC is already pouring millions of dollars into the race on his behalf. So, another rich person who feels they're entitled to have political power, too. Get out of here, dude. Thanks again for the strong nominations, but ultimately, this week's Rich Dick is Meg ONeal. Thanks to Callie on Blue Sky for the nomination and making a compelling case for ONeal, who is the CEO of Woodside Energy, Australia's largest fossil fuel company, which just received a huge boost from the government. Woodside operates a high pollution gas plant on what is known today as the Burrup Peninsula in Western Australia. It's actually occupied land that Indigenous people called Marujika. The gas plant is the biggest and oldest one in the country. The facility's license to operate was set to expire in 2030, but the Labor government just approved an extension to the project until 2070, an additional 40 years at a time when the planet needs to stop extracting and burning fossil fuels to avoid catastrophic climate change. Meg ONeal, who's a frequent target of climate protests, accused critics of the project and her company of being hypocrites. Here's what she said during a fossil fuel industry conference in Brisbane this week. Quote, "It's been a fascinating journey to watch the discussion, particularly amongst young people who have this very ideological, almost zealous view of, fossil fuel bad, renewables good, that are happily plugging in their devices, ordering things from Shine and Temu, having, one little thing shipped to their house without any sort of recognition of the energy and carbon impact of their actions." Yeah, that's right. It's those kids' fault the planet is burning up. The kids who are living in a society, I guess. Young people aren't the only ones who buy stuff online. We all do. A big reason why is no one can afford anything anymore, and online options are always cheaper. There's a cost of living crisis around the world provoked by the ruling class and its titans of capitalist industry like Meg ONeal. She went on, piling more blame on young people, alleging, quote, "I think it is time that the opponents of our industry face up to the fact that they are making the energy transition harder and more risky by slowing down investment and trying to take practical options off the table." I'm sure that if kids just stopped protesting, Woodside would be investing just massive sums of money into renewables. Again, it's the kids' fault, not me, the oil lady making a fortune sabotaging global warming reduction efforts. There's also this. Marujica was home to indigenous people who carved millions of images into stones tens of thousands of years ago, and they contain what's considered to be the oldest depictions of the human face anywhere in the world. But the First Nations art is slowly being eroded by acid rain caused by emissions from the Woodside Energy gas plant in the area. Just this week, an advisory body with the World Heritage Committee rejected an application from the Australian government to gain World Heritage protections for the rock site. And the committee cited the government's failure to protect it from, quote, degrading acidic emissions. Well, just think what another 40 years of Woodside Energy pollution in the area will do to the rocks. So Meg ONeal's company isn't just accelerating the climate crisis, her gas is also a threat to a precious site of cultural artifacts in the area, some of the oldest artwork in all of human history, invaluable stuff compared to whatever compensation she will receive presiding over their destruction. She's the latest in a long line of colonizers. All fossil fuel CEOs are rich dicks, but it's Meg ONeal's time to shine this week. Okay, friends, the show ends today with a sunrise from New York. It was sent in by Dan in Troy at the gravesite of the guy who's believed to be the original Uncle Sam. Enjoy. Thanks, Dan. That's the show. Thanks for watching. Thanks to the team behind the scenes. Find more MMN at means.tv. We also have a YouTube and a podcast channel, and you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky. One day capitalism will fall. Till then, we're going to be right here. See you next week.